The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the rolling hills of the French countryside. Nestled between fields of lavender and sunflowers, the small village of Saint-Remy was alive with the sounds of chirping birds and the distant laughter of children playing. It was a picturesque day, one that seemed to promise nothing but tranquility and joy. In a charming cottage at the edge of the village, Claire Dupont, a talented artist in her mid-30s, was putting the finishing touches on her latest painting. Her studio, a sunlit room filled with canvases and brushes, smelled faintly of turpentine and fresh paint. Claire's passion for art was deeply intertwined with her love for nature, and today she was capturing the vibrant colors of the fields outside her window. At her feet lay Bruno, her loyal golden retriever, who watched her with adoring eyes. Bruno was more than just a pet, he was Claire's companion, confidant, and source of endless inspiration. With his fluffy coat glistening in the sunlight and his tail wagging gently, he embodied the spirit of joy that Claire often sought to express in her artwork. "All right, Bruno," Claire said with a smile, stepping back to admire her work, a breathtaking landscape that showcased the beauty of their surroundings. "What do you think? Should I add more blue to the sky or leave it as is?" Bruno tilted his head as if contemplating her question, then let out a soft bark, his way of encouraging her creativity. Claire chuckled and knelt beside him, scratching behind his ears. "You always know how to make me feel better," she said affectionately. After finishing her painting for the day, Claire decided it was time for their daily walk. She grabbed Bruno's leash and headed out into the warm afternoon air. The village was bustling with life. Neighbors greeted each other with smiles, children rode bicycles down cobblestone streets, and the aroma of freshly baked bread wafted from Madame Lefebvre's bakery. As they strolled through the village square, Claire waved at familiar faces: Henri, the elderly farmer who tended to his fields with unwavering dedication; Sophie, a kind-hearted nurse who often stopped by to check on Claire after her recent bout of illness; and Julien, a young boy who adored Bruno and would often bring him treats. "Hey there, Bruno," Julien called out, running over to pet him. Bruno responded with exuberance, jumping up playfully as Julien laughed. "Are you ready for another adventure?" Claire smiled at their interaction. "You know he never turns down an adventure," she replied. "Just make sure he doesn't eat too many treats." With a final wave to Julien, Claire continued on their walk toward the outskirts of Saint-Remy. The path wound through lush meadows dotted with wildflowers swaying gently in the breeze. This was their favorite part of the day, just Claire and Bruno, surrounded by nature's beauty. As they ventured further from the village, Claire felt a sense of peace enveloping her. The world seemed to slow down as she inhaled the fragrant air filled with hints of lavender and earth. Bruno trotted beside her, occasionally stopping to sniff at intriguing scents or chase after butterflies. "Let's go explore that old farmhouse," Claire suggested suddenly, pointing toward a weathered structure nestled among trees in the distance. It had long been abandoned but always piqued her curiosity. Bruno perked up at the mention of exploration, his ears standing tall as he bounded ahead eagerly. "All right then, just remember, no getting into trouble," Claire called after him as they made their way toward the mysterious farmhouse. Little did they know that this seemingly innocent decision would lead them into an unforeseen adventure that would test their bond and bravery like never before. As Claire and Bruno approached the old farmhouse, the air around them shifted. The once vibrant colors of the meadow seemed to dull, and a sense of unease settled in Claire's stomach. The farmhouse, with its peeling paint and broken windows, stood like a ghost from another time, its presence both intriguing and foreboding. "Come on, Bruno," Claire said, trying to shake off her apprehension. "Let's see what secrets this place holds." Bruno wagged his tail enthusiastically, oblivious to the strange energy that surrounded them. He bounded ahead, eager to explore the unknown. Emerged. Weeds had overtaken the garden, and the door hung slightly ajar, creaking softly in the breeze. Claire hesitated for a moment at the threshold, glancing back at Bruno, who was sniffing around the base of a nearby tree. "It's just an old house," she reassured herself. "What's the worst that could happen?" Taking a deep breath, Claire stepped inside. The air was stale and thick with dust, and beams of sunlight filtered through cracks in the walls, illuminating motes of dust that danced in the air. The interior was a jumble of old furniture covered in white sheets and forgotten memories. Claire felt a thrill of excitement wash over her as she imagined the stories this place could tell. "Let's check out that room over there," she said, pointing toward a door at the end of a narrow hallway. Bruno followed closely behind her, his presence a comforting reminder that she wasn't alone. As they entered the room, Claire's eyes widened in awe. It was filled with remnants of a bygone era. Faded photographs lined the walls, and an old piano sat in one corner, its keys yellowed with age. She moved closer to inspect a dusty frame when suddenly Bruno began to bark furiously. "Bruno, what is it?" Claire turned to see him standing at the doorway, his body tense and alert. His growls echoed through the empty house as he stared into the shadows beyond. Claire felt her heart race as she approached him cautiously. "Calm down, boy," she whispered, though she couldn't shake off her own unease. "It's probably just a mouse or something." But Bruno wouldn't budge. He continued to bark insistently. Just then, Claire heard a faint rustling sound coming from deeper within the house, a sound that sent chills down her spine. It was then that she noticed something glinting on the floor near where Bruno was standing, a metal trap partially hidden beneath layers of dust and debris. Claire's heart sank as realization dawned on her. This wasn't just an abandoned farmhouse, it had been used for something sinister. "Oh no," she murmured under her breath. "This place is dangerous." Before she could react further, a loud noise erupted from behind her, a sudden crash followed by a snapping sound that echoed through the hallway. In an instant, Claire felt a sharp pain as she stumbled backward over an unseen object on the floor. "Bruno," she cried out as she fell awkwardly, twisting her ankle painfully upon landing. The world around her spun for a moment before settling into focus again. She looked up to see Bruno rushing to her side, his eyes wide with concern. "Stay close," Claire urged him as she tried to push herself up but winced at the pain radiating from her ankle. It was swelling quickly. She knew she wouldn't be able to walk without help. Bruno licked her hand gently as if trying to reassure her that everything would be all right. "I'm okay," Claire said softly, though tears welled in her eyes from both pain and fear. She glanced around nervously. They were trapped in this dilapidated house with unknown dangers lurking just beyond sight. With nightfall approaching and no one around for miles, panic began to creep into Claire's heart. "I need to get home," she whispered to Bruno, who remained steadfast by her side. Every passing moment, darkness enveloped the farmhouse more tightly, a stark contrast to the vibrant day they had just enjoyed outside. "Bruno," Claire said slowly as an idea formed in her mind despite her fear. "You have to help me." She looked into his intelligent eyes and saw unwavering loyalty reflected back at her. With determination ignited within her heart, Claire knew they had to find a way out together, before it was too late. The dim light filtering through the cracked windows of the farmhouse cast eerie shadows across the room, and Claire's heart raced as she tried to assess her situation. She had twisted her ankle badly, and the pain shot through her with every attempt to move. Panic began to settle in her chest as she realized the gravity of their predicament. "Bruno," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "we need to get out of here." She looked at her loyal companion, who seemed to sense her distress. His tail wagged, but his eyes remained focused and alert, ready to protect her. Claire took a deep breath, trying to quell the rising tide of fear. "Okay, let's think this through," she murmured to herself. She needed a plan. She couldn't stay here. It was too dangerous, and night was approaching quickly. With great effort, Claire pushed herself into a sitting position against the wall, wincing as pain radiated from her ankle. "I can't walk," she admitted aloud, frustration creeping into her voice. "But you can help me." Bruno tilted his head, as if he understood every word she said. Claire reached for his collar and gave it a gentle tug. "I need you to go find help," she urged him. "You know the way back to the village. You can do this." Bruno's ears perked up at the mention of help, and he let out a series of excited barks, as if encouraging her to believe in him. Claire could see the determination in his eyes. He was ready to take action. "All right," she said, gathering her strength. "You're my brave boy." With that, she carefully positioned herself on the floor and began to crawl toward the door, using the wall for support. Once they reached the threshold, Claire paused for a moment to catch her breath. The world outside was growing darker by the minute, and she could hear the distant sounds of crickets beginning their evening song. "Go on now, Bruno," she whispered, gesturing toward the path that led back home. "Find someone. Anyone." Bruno hesitated for just a moment before bounding out into the fading light. Claire watched as he disappeared into the shadows of the trees surrounding the farmhouse. Her heart swelled with pride but also with worry. Would he be able to find help in time? As Bruno raced through the underbrush, he felt a surge of instinct driving him forward. The sense of familiar places filled his nose: freshly baked bread from Madame Lefebvre's bakery, the earthy aroma of Henry's fields, and he followed them with unwavering determination. Meanwhile, Claire remained behind in the farmhouse, anxiety gnawing at her as she waited for Bruno's return. She leaned against the doorframe and strained her ears for any sounds that might indicate help was on its way. Minutes felt like hours as darkness enveloped the farmhouse completely. Just when despair began to creep into her heart, Claire heard a rustling sound outside. A familiar bark echoed through the stillness of the night. "Bruno," she called out weakly, hope igniting within her once more. Moments later, Bruno burst back into view with Henri and Sophie following closely behind him. The elderly farmer's face was etched with concern while Sophie held a flashlight that illuminated their path. "There you are," Sophie exclaimed as they approached Claire. "We were worried sick when Bruno came running into town barking like mad." "Claire." Henri knelt beside her and examined her ankle with gentle hands. "What happened?" I fell," Claire stammered, relieved yet embarrassed by how easily she had gotten herself into this situation. "I twisted my ankle while exploring this old farmhouse." "Exploring? You shouldn't be out here alone." Henri scolded gently but with genuine concern in his voice. Sophie shone her flashlight around the room and frowned at its disarray. "This place looks dangerous," she said quietly before turning back to Claire. "Let's get you out of here." With Henry's help, they carefully lifted Claire off the ground and supported her weight between them as they made their way back through the doorway. Bruno trotted alongside them proudly, his tail wagging furiously as if he had accomplished some great feat. As they stepped outside into the cool night air, Claire couldn't help but feel an overwhelming wave of gratitude wash over her for both Bruno and her friends who had come to rescue her. "Thank you so much," Claire said sincerely as they made their way down the path toward safety. "I don't know what I would have done without you all. It's what friends are for," Sophie replied warmly, giving Bruno an affectionate pat on his head. As they walked together under a blanket of stars twinkling above them, Claire realized that while danger had lurked within those old walls, it had also brought forth an incredible display of loyalty and friendship, one that would forever change how she viewed both Bruno and her community. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the landscape as Claire, Henri, Sophie, and Bruno made their way back to the village. The air was cool and crisp, a welcome relief after the tense moments spent in the farmhouse. Claire leaned heavily on Henri and Sophie, grateful for their support as they navigated the uneven path. "Just a little further," Sophie encouraged, her voice steady and reassuring. "We'll have you home in no time." Bruno trotted alongside them, occasionally glancing up at Claire with an expression that seemed to say, "I'm here for you." His loyalty and bravery filled Claire with warmth, and she couldn't help but smile at her faithful companion. As they reached the edge of the village, the familiar sights of Saint-Remy greeted them: dimly lit cottages with smoke curling from chimneys, the gentle sound of laughter drifting from a nearby tavern, and the comforting scent of fresh bread wafting through the air. But Claire's heart sank as she thought about how close she had come to danger. "Thank you for coming to find me," Claire said once more, her voice filled with gratitude. "I don't know what I would have done without Bruno leading you back." Henri chuckled softly. "That dog of yours has a nose for trouble, and a heart full of courage. He knew something was wrong before we did." Sophie nodded in agreement. "He was barking like a madman when he reached us. It was clear he was trying to tell us something important." As they approached Claire's cottage, she felt a wave of relief wash over her. The warm glow of her home felt like a beacon of safety after their harrowing adventure. Once inside, they settled Claire onto the couch and propped her injured ankle up on a cushion. "I'll get some ice," Sophie said quickly, heading toward the kitchen. "You need to keep that swelling down." Henri took a seat across from Claire, concern etched on his face. "You need to be more careful, Claire. That farmhouse is no place for someone alone, especially not with your ankle like this." "I know," she replied softly, guilt creeping in. "I just wanted to explore. I didn't think it would turn into such a mess." Henri shook his head gently. Sometimes curiosity leads us into danger. But you have good friends, and a very brave dog, to watch out for you. Just then, Sophie returned with a bag of ice wrapped in a towel. She carefully placed it on Claire's ankle and smiled reassuringly. This should help reduce the swelling. Just keep it elevated for now. Thank you both, Claire said sincerely as she settled back against the cushions. I really appreciate everything you've done tonight. Bruno lay at her feet, his head resting on her lap as if to say he was still on duty, ever watchful and ready to protect her. As they sat together in the cozy warmth of her cottage, Claire couldn't shake off the feeling that their adventure had changed something within her. The bond she shared with Bruno had deepened beyond mere companionship. He had proven himself to be not only her loyal friend but also her protector. Do you think we should tell everyone about what happened? Sophie asked after a moment of silence. I mean, it's quite a story. Claire considered this for a moment. I think we should, she replied thoughtfully. Bruno deserves recognition for what he did tonight. Henri nodded in agreement. Absolutely. We should celebrate his bravery. He saved your life after all. With that decision made, Claire felt a sense of purpose return to her spirit. They would share Bruno's heroism with the village, a tale that would not only honor him but also serve as a reminder of the importance of community and vigilance. As they discussed plans for an impromptu gathering at the village square to celebrate Bruno's bravery, Claire felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for her friends and her beloved dog. The night had begun with fear and uncertainty but had transformed into an opportunity to strengthen their bonds and share joy. Tomorrow we'll tell everyone, Claire said with renewed energy as she looked down at Bruno, who was now snoring softly at her feet. You've earned yourself quite the celebration, my brave boy. Bruno stirred slightly at the sound of his name but remained blissfully asleep, unaware of the honor awaiting him. As laughter filled the room and plans were made for tomorrow's gathering, Claire felt hopeful once more, knowing that together with Bruno and her friends, they could face whatever challenges lay ahead. The sun rose over Saint-Remy the next morning, casting a warm golden light across the village. Claire awoke to the sound of birds chirping outside her window and the comforting presence of Bruno curled up at her feet. Despite the pain in her ankle, she felt a renewed sense of purpose as she remembered the events of the previous night. After a quick breakfast with Henri and Sophie, Claire began to prepare for the gathering they had planned to celebrate Bruno's bravery. The village square was a hub of activity, and she could already see neighbors setting up tables and decorations, eager to honor her loyal companion. Are you sure you're up for this? Sophie asked as they walked toward the square, concern etched on her face. You don't want to overdo it. I'll be fine, Claire assured her, though she knew she would need to take it easy. Bruno deserves this celebration, and I want everyone to know how brave he was. As they approached the square, Claire was overwhelmed by the sight of familiar faces coming together. Children ran around excitedly, while adults chatted and laughed, all eager to contribute to the festivities. Colorful banners were hung from lampposts, and tables were laden with homemade treats and refreshments. Henri stepped forward, clapping his hands to gather everyone's attention. Friends and neighbors, he called out, his voice booming with warmth. Today we gather not just for a celebration but to honor a true hero among us, Bruno, the brave golden retriever who saved Claire's life. A cheer erupted from the crowd as they turned their attention to Bruno, who was now sitting proudly beside Claire. He wagged his tail enthusiastically, seemingly aware of the excitement surrounding him. Claire stood up slowly, leaning on Sophie for support as she addressed the gathering. Thank you all for being here, she began, her voice steady despite her lingering pain. Last night was frightening for me, but thanks to Bruno's quick thinking and loyalty, I'm here today. She gestured toward Bruno, who was now basking in the attention. He led Henri and Sophie back to me when I needed help most. I can't express how grateful I am for his bravery, and for all of you who came together so quickly. The villagers erupted into applause once more, their admiration for Bruno evident in their smiles and cheers. Claire felt a swell of pride as she looked down at her faithful friend. Now, Henri said with a twinkle in his eye, we have some special treats prepared for our hero. He motioned toward a table filled with dog-friendly snacks, homemade biscuits shaped like bones and bowls of fresh water. As Bruno trotted over to investigate the offerings, laughter filled the square. Children rushed forward with treats in hand, eager to share their love with him. Claire watched with joy as Bruno accepted their affection graciously, his tail wagging furiously. Sophie leaned closer to Claire. "This is wonderful. It's so heartwarming to see everyone come together like this." "I know," Claire replied softly, feeling a deep sense of belonging wash over her. "It reminds me that no matter what happens, we have each other." As the festivities continued throughout the day, stories were shared about Bruno's antics and adventures around the village. Claire joined in on the laughter and camaraderie, feeling lighter than she had in days. Later in the afternoon, Henri gathered everyone around for a special ceremony. He held up a small wooden plaque that read, "In honor of Bruno, the brave heart of Saint Remy." "This plaque will hang in our village hall," Henri declared proudly. "It will remind us all of bravery and loyalty, qualities that both Bruno and Claire embody." The crowd erupted into applause once again as Henri presented the plaque to Claire. She accepted it with tears in her eyes, overwhelmed by gratitude for her friends and community. "Thank you all so much," Claire said emotionally. "This means more than I can express. And thank you again, Bruno, you truly are my hero." Bruno barked happily in response, nudging Claire's hand with his nose as if he understood every word. As twilight descended upon Saint Remy, lanterns were lit around the square, casting a warm glow over the gathering. The atmosphere was filled with joy and laughter as villagers shared stories late into the evening. Claire sat back in her chair with Bruno resting beside her, feeling an overwhelming sense of love and connection surrounding her. She realized that while danger had brought them together in unexpected ways, it had also deepened bonds that would last a lifetime. In that moment under the stars, surrounded by friends old and new, Claire knew they could face any challenge that lay ahead together. The celebration in the village square continued well into the evening, the air filled with laughter, music, and the delicious aroma of food being shared among neighbors. Claire leaned back in her chair, her heart swelling with gratitude as she watched Bruno bask in the affection of the villagers. He was surrounded by children, each taking turns to pet him and offer him treats, his tail wagging with uncontainable joy. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Claire felt a sense of peace wash over her. The events of the previous night seemed like a distant memory, overshadowed by the warmth of community and friendship that enveloped her now. "Claire," Sophie called out, her voice bright with excitement as she approached with a plate of pastries. "You have to try these. Madame Lefebvre made them special for Bruno's celebration." Claire laughed as she accepted a pastry, taking a bite of the flaky treat. "Delicious. I can see why everyone loves her baking." "Speaking of love," Sophie said, glancing over at Bruno, who was now lying on his side, enjoying a belly rub from Julien. "He's really taken over the hearts of everyone here." "Absolutely," Claire replied, her eyes shining with affection for her dog. "He's not just my companion, he's truly become a part of this community." Henri joined them, holding a glass of sparkling cider. "To Bruno," he declared, raising his glass high. "May he always protect us and bring joy to our village." The crowd echoed his sentiment, lifting their glasses in unison. To Bruno, with laughter ringing in her ears and warmth filling her heart, Claire felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. It was moments like these that reminded her how fortunate she was to live in such a close-knit community. As night fell fully over Saint Remy, lanterns illuminated the square, casting a soft glow that made everything feel magical. Children danced around the tables while adults shared stories and reminisced about their own adventures. Claire listened intently as Henri recounted tales from his youth, stories filled with mischief and camaraderie that brought smiles to everyone's faces. Then, as if sensing that it was time for something special, Henri turned to Claire and said, "Why don't you share your story? Tell everyone what happened last night." Claire hesitated for a moment but then nodded. She stood up slowly, feeling the support of Sophie beside her as she addressed the crowd. "I'd like to share my experience from last night," she began, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. "I went exploring that old farmhouse," she continued, glancing at Bruno who was now sitting attentively at her feet. "I didn't think anything could go wrong. I just wanted to see what was inside." The villagers listened intently as Claire recounted how Bruno had sensed danger and alerted Henri and Sophie to come find her. She described the fear she felt when she realized she was alone and injured but also emphasized how grateful she was for Bruno's loyalty and bravery. "Without him," Claire concluded, I don't know what would have happened to me. He not only saved my life but also brought our community together in ways I never expected." A wave of applause erupted from the crowd as Claire finished speaking. She felt tears prick at her eyes, but they were tears of joy, of gratitude for both Bruno and the people who surrounded her. "Thank you all for being here today," she added, looking around at familiar faces filled with warmth and support. "This celebration means more than I can express." As she stepped down from her makeshift podium, Bruno bounded toward her once more, nuzzling against her leg as if to say he was proud of her too. Henri stepped forward again, holding up the plaque they had prepared earlier. "And now," he announced dramatically, "it is time to officially unveil our tribute to Bruno." The villagers gathered around eagerly as Henri placed the plaque on a small easel in front of them. The inscription read, "In honor of Bruno, the brave heart of Saint Remy." Cheers erupted once more as everyone clapped and whistled in appreciation for both Bruno's heroism and Claire's heartfelt words. As night deepened and stars twinkled overhead like diamonds scattered across velvet, Claire felt a profound sense of connection, not just to Bruno but to every person gathered there that evening. They were more than neighbors, they were family. With laughter ringing through the air and music playing softly in the background, Claire took a moment to breathe it all in. The love surrounding them, the joy shared among friends, and knew that whatever challenges lay ahead would be faced together. Bruno lay contentedly at her feet as she watched children dance under lantern light and adults share stories late into the night. In that moment, surrounded by love and laughter, Claire understood that true heroism wasn't just about bravery in times of danger, it was also about building connections and cherishing those we hold dear. And with that thought warming her heart, Claire smiled down at Bruno, knowing that their adventure had only just begun. "Thank you for following along on this journey.